What would you do if your neighbors showed up at your door with fake police officers demanding to inspect your property? What if they had bogus badges, fraudulent citations, and the audacity to threaten you with arrest in your own driveway? This isn't some dystopian nightmare. This actually happened to me, and it nearly cost me my FBI career. But what I discovered about my neighbor's scheme was far more terrifying than I ever imagined. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and buckle up because this story gets wild. Picture this. It's dawn. You're barely awake, and suddenly there's aggressive pounding on your front door. Not a polite knock, the kind of hammering that makes your windows rattle and your heart race. I stumbled to the door, thinking maybe someone was in genuine trouble, only to find two people in matching uniforms with bright HOA police letters across their chests. Now, I've been in law enforcement long enough to spot fake badges from a mile away, and these looked like they came straight from a costume shop. But these weren't kids playing dress-up. These people were dead serious, standing on my porch with stern faces and an attitude that screamed authority. "We're here on official business," the taller one declared, pointing directly at me. "Your property has multiple violations, and we need to inspect your garage immediately." I felt that familiar surge of frustration you get when someone's trying to pull a fast one on you. "What violations?" "There's nothing in my garage that breaks any rules," I responded, keeping my voice steady. But here's where it gets interesting. They didn't mention warrants, real police involvement, or any actual legal authority. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. "I'm an FBI agent," I told them calmly. "If you have legitimate cause, show me proper documentation." The tall guy actually smirked at that. Can you believe it? He had the nerve to tell me that being FBI doesn't excuse anyone from neighborhood codes. But then, I saw movement behind them, and everything clicked into place. Karen, my neighbor, who'd always been loud, pushy, and complained about every tiny thing on our block, was standing there with the smuggest grin I'd ever seen. She was clearly orchestrating this entire show, and my gut told me this was just the beginning. "Karen, what's going on here?" I asked, stepping onto my porch, but keeping my voice controlled. She lifted her chin with that classic entitled neighbor attitude. "We've all encountered—" "Oh, I'm just making sure the rules are followed," she said, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. "You can't claim special treatment because of your job." The fake officers nodded along like trained puppets. "We have reports of strange activity in your garage," the woman officer claimed. I couldn't help but let out a tense laugh. "Strange activity? Like what?" Karen shrugged with theatrical indifference. "I heard noises late at night. Could be anything. You might be storing hazardous materials, or maybe you're plotting something." This is where Karen's scheme really started to show its true colors. The tall officer pulled out what looked like an official document, but when I examined it closely, there was no seal, no legitimate signature, just typed words claiming I was under investigation by the HOA police. "That's not an official document," I pointed out. "You two have no right to demand entry into my home." But Karen was ready with her next move. "You sure you want to argue? I can add your refusal to the list of violations." Now, here's something every HOA member needs to understand. Legitimate HOA enforcement doesn't work this way. I'd lived in this neighborhood long enough to know we only had volunteers who checked on basic things like yard maintenance and paint colors. We'd never authorized any kind of police force. "Since when does the HOA send out its own police force?" I challenged them. The shorter officer flashed her plastic-looking badge right in my face. "We have new powers now. Step aside." I shook my head firmly. "No, unless you come back with real law enforcement and a valid warrant, you're not entering my home." That's when the intimidation really ramped up. The man took a step forward and said, "Don't test us." As a federal agent, I knew better than to escalate things physically. But I also wasn't about to back down from what was clearly harassment and impersonation of law enforcement officers. I crossed my arms and made my position clear. "If you try to enter here illegally, you'll be the ones facing charges." Karen smirked again. "You can't threaten us. Everybody on this street knows you think you're above the rules." Then my phone buzzed, my boss calling at dawn, which never happens unless something serious is going down. My stomach dropped as I answered the call. "Get to the office right now. We have a problem," he said, his voice strained in a way I'd rarely heard. "Is this about some complaint against me?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "I'll explain in person." When I returned to confront the fake officers, they were still there with Karen, hovering behind them like she owned the entire street. "I have to go," I told them. "I'll deal with this later." The woman officer shook her head. "If you leave, we'll mark you as uncooperative." Karen stepped closer, her gaze cold and calculating. "You want your neighbors to see you run away?" What happened next shows just how sophisticated Karen's operation really was. The male officer actually raised a pair of plastic zip ties, as if he planned to arrest me right there in my own driveway. "Put those down," I said firmly. "Impersonating a law enforcement officer is a federal crime. You know that, right?" The woman grabbed her radio, though I seriously doubted it connected to any real dispatch system. Karen clicked her tongue like a disappointed teacher. You might want to listen. They have the power to write you up. A fake citation means nothing, I replied, but the tall man waved those zip ties in my face again. You want to find out if these are fake too? He threatened. That's when I realized how carefully orchestrated this whole setup was. They wanted to push me into doing something rash, something they could use against me later. It was a trap, plain and simple. I forced myself to de-escalate. Look, I'm stepping away to handle an urgent matter at my real job. You all need to leave my property. Karen shrugged with mock innocence. We'll be watching. The HOA has eyes. That made me laugh outright. The real HOA might, but you sure aren't it. By the time I reached the FBI field office, my boss was waiting in the hallway, looking stiff and anxious. You took your sweet time, he snapped, then waved me into his office. What he told me next was chilling. Local authorities were complaining about my threatening behavior. I explained the entire situation, emphasizing how those officers had no legitimate badges and that Karen was orchestrating everything. He stared at me for a long moment. Well, we have a problem. Higher-ups have flagged this. There's talk of misconduct, and I can't protect you if it escalates. My stomach dropped, but I'm innocent. Someone's trying to frame me, or at least push me out of my job. He rubbed his eyes wearily. I don't care if they're real cops or not. There's paperwork on my desk claiming you resisted a lawful inspection. It's all nonsense, but it's official now. This is exactly how these HOA scams work. Folks, they create a paper trail of fake complaints and bogus reports that make their way into official channels. Even when the authorities know something's fishy, the bureaucratic process takes on a life of its own. The harassment didn't stop there. Later that day, I received a text from a blocked number. Better watch your step. We know who you are. Karen had clearly taken her petty neighborhood power trip to a dangerous new level. Even my coworkers started giving me strange looks, like they'd already heard rumors about my misconduct. An agent named Davis pulled me aside in the break room. Got a second? He asked quietly. I overheard something in passing. Word is, you're on thin ice. You might want to watch your back. Watch my back here, or in my neighborhood. I asked. Davis frowned. Both, maybe, and I'd keep an eye on that Karen lady. She's bragging about getting you in trouble. When I drove home that evening, sure enough, there was a strange SUV parked near my house with tinted windows that made my skin crawl. I hurried inside, locked the door, and drew the curtains. Almost immediately, my phone dinged with an email from the Bureau's internal affairs team, asking me to explain my morning altercation with the local security detail. Karen had managed to create a perfect storm. Her fake patrol was generating real complaints that were making their way through official channels, putting my entire career in jeopardy. The Bureau was pressing me for answers, but every explanation I gave sounded more unbelievable than the last. The next day, I tried to contact the official HOA through their listed phone number, but my call went straight to a recording about technical difficulties. I sent an email titled Urgent, Possible Impersonation, only to have it bounce back as undeliverable. I even checked the neighborhood website. It showed outdated information with no mention of any new security measures. Karen had systematically shut down every official communication channel, leaving residents with no way to verify what was legitimate and what wasn't. This is a crucial warning for anyone dealing with HOA issues. Always verify authority through multiple official channels. If you can't reach your actual HOA board or management company, that's a huge red flag. I reached out to a local police contact named Alvarez, a no-nonsense officer who sometimes worked with federal agencies. I summarized the entire situation: fake badges, bogus citations, and a neighbor orchestrating what appeared to be an elaborate scam. Alvarez sounded skeptical, but agreed to investigate the license plate of the so-called HOA vehicle. If it belongs to a private security firm, he explained, they can't legally act as law enforcement. While waiting for his callback, the intimidation campaign intensified. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to before started whispering behind their fences, looking at me like I was the neighborhood troublemaker. One morning, Tamara, one of the few people still willing to talk to me, knocked on my door, looking pale and frantic. They left this on my porch, she said, holding up a notice demanding a fine for unapproved paint colors. The document used the same fake official language they'd used on me, warning about forced eviction if she didn't pay. She looked ready to cry. I called the HOA for help, but the line was dead. Is Karen even allowed to do this? No, this is a scam, I told her firmly, though I wished I had a better solution to offer. Don't pay them, I'll figure this out. But she just shrugged, fear evident in her eyes. I can't risk losing my home. If nobody's stopping them, then maybe it's real. A few days later, I was called into an official FBI inquiry. The conference room was packed with higher-ups, all wearing stern expressions. My boss stood near the back, arms folded, looking grim. We're here to discuss the numerous complaints against you, an older agent began. They involve alleged threats to neighborhood authorities and repeated refusals to obey local laws. Those authorities are fake. I insisted, fighting to keep my voice calm. Their badges aren't real, and the HOA never approved them. A woman lifted a thick file. We have statements from at least 10 neighbors claiming otherwise. They say, you bullied them. I was about to present my evidence when the door swung open, and in walked Karen. She wore a professional suit instead of her usual casual clothes, and carried a sleek briefcase. What is she doing here? I blurted out, genuinely shocked. Miss Garrett has submitted evidence on behalf of the local enforcement group. One of the agents explained. But then came the bombshell that explained everything. The older agent turned to Karen and said, before we proceed, we should disclose your family connection. Karen gave a curt nod and glanced at me with a pitying smile. My uncle is the deputy director of this bureau. I tried to handle this matter quietly, but when your behavior escalated, I had no choice but to bring it to his attention. My stomach lurched. The deputy director was near the top of our entire chain of command. If he was her uncle, that explained everything, how she'd shut down the real HOA's communication lines, how my neighbors felt powerless to resist, and how she'd managed to file official complaints that reached my supervisors so quickly. Despite Karen's family connections, I wasn't about to give up. I started gathering evidence. Alvarez confirmed that the license plate belonged to a private security firm with no official contract with our HOA. The so-called citations had no legal backing, and the officers had no legitimate law enforcement authority. But the real breakthrough came when I decided to attend a community meeting Karen had organized. She'd sent anonymous notes to residents, calling for a gathering at the community center. That evening, the place was packed. Karen stood at a makeshift podium with her fake officers flanking her like bodyguards. She launched into a speech about community safety and the need for her volunteer police program. Unfortunately, we've had some resistance from individuals who don't respect our community standards, she said, her eyes darting toward me for a split second. I couldn't stay quiet any longer. I stood up and projected my voice across the room. That's a lie. Your so-called HOA police are not legitimate. They're part of a private security group with no legal authority. You're running a scam, Karen. A few gasps rippled through the crowd. One of the fake officers moved toward me, but I held up my badge. Federal agent, touch me and you'll regret it. I pulled out my phone with the screenshots of Alvarez's findings. This is proof that your HOA police are unlicensed and unauthorized. The security company they work for has no contract with our community. The room buzzed with worried whispers. One man stood up, looking shaken. Karen, is that true? Are they not real security? Karen faltered, her confidence cracking. They're volunteers, she stammered. Volunteers don't have the right to detain people or issue fines. I shot back, and you've been making up infractions to squeeze money out of your own neighbors. What happened next was beautiful to watch. People started moving forward, demanding to see the citations Karen had been issuing. Her hands shook as she tried to pull the documents away, but one neighbor snatched a citation from the stack. This doesn't look right at all, he announced, holding it up for everyone to see. There's no official seal, no legitimate signature. More people came forward, taking pictures of the bogus paperwork with their phones. The tension hit a breaking point when one of the fake officers backed away, muttering, I didn't sign up for this, before bolting out the door. That's when Alvarez appeared at the entrance in full uniform. Everyone stay calm, he announced. We're conducting an investigation into unauthorized security practices and possible extortion. Karen's face drained of color. She tried to compose herself, but it was too late. Alvarez walked up to her. Ma'am, I need you to come with me for questioning. Karen sputtered, trying to rally her dwindling supporters. This is harassment. I have connections. You can't do this. But nobody backed her up. Her fake authority had crumbled in front of everyone's eyes. The official investigation that followed was thorough and damning. An HOA audit confirmed that Karen had been pocketing fine money for herself. Her uncle, the deputy director, claimed he had no knowledge of her scheme. But the scandal was enough to put him under heavy scrutiny. He quietly resigned within weeks. The private security company she'd hired faced legal action for unlawful enforcement activities. Several neighbors came forward with stories of intimidation and illegal fees they'd paid under duress. My boss called me into his office a few weeks later with a rare smile. Turns out you were right all along, he said. Internal Affairs has cleared you completely. Karen's actions were deemed illegal and unauthorized, and we've received formal apologies from the neighbors who filed complaints under pressure. The relief was overwhelming. I'd managed to hold on to my career and reputation despite Karen's relentless campaign to destroy both. This entire experience taught me some crucial lessons about HOA scams that I want to share with you. First, always verify authority through official channels. If someone claims to represent your HOA, contact your management company or board directly using contact information from official documents, not numbers provided by the people making claims. Second, legitimate HOA enforcement follows specific legal procedures. Real citations come with proper documentation, official seals, and clear appeals processes. If something looks fake, it probably is. Third, document everything. Take photos, record conversations where legal, and keep detailed notes. These become crucial evidence if you need to involve law enforcement. Fourth, don't let intimidation tactics work. People like Karen rely on fear and confusion to maintain their fake authority. Once you challenge them publicly and show others they have no real power, their schemes fall apart quickly. Finally, remember that even powerful connections can't protect someone who's breaking the law. Karen thought her uncle's position would shield her, but federal agencies take impersonation of law enforcement very seriously. Looking back, Karen's scheme was more sophisticated than most neighborhood disputes, but the basic pattern is unfortunately common. Someone with a desire for control identifies weaknesses in community governance, then exploits fear and confusion to seize unauthorized power. The key to stopping these situations is community awareness and official verification. If Karen had succeeded, who knows how far her fake police force might have expanded their jurisdiction. Today, my neighborhood is back to normal. No more fake cops, no more bogus citations, just the occasional curious glance from people still processing how close they came to living under one person's twisted version of law and order. If you're dealing with suspicious HOA enforcement in your own community, don't suffer in silence. Verify everything, document the abuse, and involve real authorities when necessary. These scams only work when people are too afraid or isolated to fight back. What's your HOA horror story? Share it in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about standing up to neighborhood bullies and fake authority figures. Until next time, stay vigilant and know your rights.